I looked to my right, and Jesus walked into the operating room like I thought he was the surgeon at first, but he's wearing a white robe. He looked very different than the Jesus that I'd been shown as a kid. He had darker skin than I thought. As a kid growing up in North America, I was always shown a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. But that's not the way he looked.
Right.
And that's not the way he looks, I should say. So when he walked in, I instantly knew it was Jesus. There's just something about it when you're in the presence of your Savior, you know it. And he held out his hand, and like this is like a physical person standing next to me. And he holds out his hand and he says, "I want to answer your prayer." And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? This is weird. I'm gonna look back around to see where the other nurses had gone, and everything was just kind of like foggy in the room. It was weird. And so I finally, I didn't grab his hand at first because I'm trying to figure it all out. I'm thinking, this is really bizarre. What's Jesus doing here? And then I thought, well, did I die?
This is another episode of Vision Rebirth. This is a podcast where we explore life-changing stories of near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, divine dreams, meditations, and encounters with other beings. And today we have a special guest. He's, of course, an NDE survivor. He's a speaker and author. You can find some of his story in the book Guideposts, Witnessing Heaven series, Glimpses of Eternity. And he also authored his own book called I Held the Hand of Jesus in Heaven. We have Mike McKinsey.
I'm doing great, Erica. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
For sure. Happy to have you. So I guess I want to start at the point of, you being on that operating table. You were getting an appendix surgery, and that's when you flatlined and you saw Jesus. Can you describe, first of all, seeing Jesus is such a profound thing. So what was it like to actually see Jesus and then know it was him without a shadow of a doubt?
So you're right. I was laying on the surgical table. I was really sick. I had a pretty high fever, and I was talking to the people around me. They wheel me over from they helped me get from the gurney to the surgical table. And as soon as I laid down there, before they put a mask on or anything, I looked to my right, and Jesus walked into the operating room like I thought he was the surgeon at first, but he's wearing a white robe. He looked very different than the Jesus that I'd been shown as a kid. He had darker skin than I thought. As a kid growing up in North America, I was always shown a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. But it wasn't. That's not the way he looked.
Right.
And that's not the way he looks, I should say. So when he walked in, I instantly knew it was Jesus. There's just something about it when you're in the presence of your Savior, you know it. And he held out his hand, and this is like a physical person standing next to me. And he holds out his hand and he says, "I want to answer your prayer." And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? This is weird. I'm going to look back around to see where the other nurses had gone, and everything was just kind of like foggy in the room. It was weird. And so I finally, I didn't grab his hand at first because I'm trying to figure it all out. I'm thinking, this is really bizarre. What's Jesus doing here? And then I thought, well, did I die? I must be dead. But he didn't say, "Let's go." It's your time or whatever. He said, "I want to answer your prayer." And I thought, okay, I didn't pray to die. I actually prayed that I would get through surgery and everything would be fine. So, I was really confused, but I took his hand. As soon as I took his hand, I found myself, both of us, standing on this grassy hill, and everything around me is pure white, like the brightest white I've ever seen. And I'm still holding his hand. I look down at my feet, and I'm standing in bare feet and in my hospital gown. And my senses were heightened to the point where I could feel every
Mm.
blade of grass under my feet. I could count the number of blades of grass. I knew instantly how many blades of grass were touching my feet. And the grass was beautiful, but that was all I could see. Just a little bit of grass under my feet, and then everything
Wow.
else was white, like just blinding white. And all of a sudden there's like this circular light. It's almost like basketball size off to my right a little bit, and it starts sending out these little light beams, and they're kind of coming at me. They look like fluorescent tubes, but they're short. They're only like a couple feet long, a little bit, a little
Hmm.
wider than the fluorescent tubes, but they start zipping by me. And one of them's actually coming at my head, and it hits me in the forehead. And when it does, it makes this kind of like a weird little buzzing sound, but it
Hmm.
warmed me like all the way down to my toes. It was just this comfortable, warm feeling. And I'm looking around as my eyes sort of get used to that bright white. It was like somebody pulled a curtain from my right to my left of the white, and it just opened up to this beautiful scenery. So now, instead of all bright white, I'm looking at
Wow.
a city below me. I'm actually standing. I can see below the grass that I was standing on. So I'm standing on a hill. It gives way to a valley below. Right below me, there's these beautiful flowers. Like the grass ends, and there's these little flowers, and they're kind of like wispy little flowers. They look like sweet peas. They're all pastel colors. They're really pretty, and they're kind of swaying in the wind a little bit, but there's no wind. Um, and then below the flowers, there's this great big field of flowers. There's a city down there, like a city in the valley. But the fog that was in front of me is now on top of the city. So all I see is rooftops sticking through. And it's like it's like there's this the
Hmm.
city's huge. And right about in the middle, there's this golden dome. It looks like a Capitol dome, but it's all gold. And it's this huge building. And there's a couple other Capitol domes, scattered around the city. And there's a lot of and some of them are white, some of them are gold. And there's a lot of like really tall, like almost like church steeples sticking through the fog. But I noticed that, like, I
Hmm.
wasn't sure they were church steeples because there were no crosses at the top. They were just pointy. I thought that was kind of interesting, something that I figured out later. Um,
Hmm.
and then on the other side of the city was another mountain, and it was full of these beautiful, like, they look like pine trees. And then, so now, and above the trees, there's this like gorgeous sky, like bright, vivid colors, the colors I've never seen. I mean, so bright. And it was like the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen, but there was no sun. So thought that was kind of weird too. But I'm looking at it's this colorful sky.
Wow.
And now those little light beams that were coming that hit me in the head, they're going across the valley. And one of them hits the tip of one of those really tall pine trees on the other side of the valley. And when it did, it burst into like these little, it's almost like fireworks, but they were bright white, like pow, it just popped. And then those little things went all across the valley. And pretty soon the sky is full of these bright, these bright fireworks. They're just going off everywhere, just pow, pow. But they're bright white, and they're it was just the most amazing thing. And I'm looking at them, and I look back at where they were coming from, and Jesus says to me, "It's the glory of the Lord." And that had a pretty deep meaning for me as a kid,
Wow.
because we used to watch the Charlie Brown Christmas special, and when Linus came out and with his blanket on stage, and he said, "The glory of the Lord shone all around them," I used to think, gosh, what would the glory of the Lord look like? What must that look like? And
Right.
so I started praying that God would show me his glory. And when Jesus held out his hand and said, "I want to answer
Wow.
your prayer," also when I was a kid, this was before I asked him to show me the glory of the Lord. My grandfather passed away, and I was at his funeral. And I remember asking God, the priest is up there saying, what a great place heaven is. There's no more pain. There's no tears. Everybody's happy. It's a beautiful place, and you live with Jesus. And I remember praying as a kid to God, saying, can you show me heaven? That sounds like a really cool place. I want to see it. And so those were two childhood prayers that he answered. So
Yeah.
right when he said, it's the glory of the Lord, uh, I just was overcome with emotion. I fell to my knees, and as soon as my knees hit the ground, they shocked me and they brought me back to life. And so now, the scenery's gone, Jesus is gone. Now I got a doctor leaning over me with a
Wow.
mask, and he's saying, "Do you know your name?" And I was like, "Yeah." Of course, I said Mike, but I didn't open my mouth and verbalize. I just figured he heard me, and he asked me again, "Do you know your name?" And then I said, I audibly said Mike, and he says, "Okay, he's back." And they sent me up to ICU, and I spent 12 days in the hospital. Finally got
Wow.
out. Now the second part, let me go ahead and
Now,
finish the second part, and I'll
yeah.
tell you, and you can ask me the questions because everybody has questions about this. It's pretty wild. So when I got home from the hospital, I told some of my friends, they would come over, and I was overcome with emotion every time I would tell this story. So I'd have a friend sitting there, this 45, 50-year-old man, holding my hand and crying right along with me as I'm telling him about it, right? And then I tell him the second
Right.
half where Jesus showed up 24 hours later and had a 3-hour conversation with them. And they're like everyone that I told, for the first like 6 or 7 people, they said, they went from crying and just thinking this is the most amazing thing. And they looked at me like, and when I said Jesus showed up 24 hours later, they were like, dude, you're crazy. You know, that can't happen. So I had them up until that point, and then they didn't believe me anymore, and they thought I was nuts. And I just heard God whisper to me, you don't have to tell that part yet.
Yeah.
Now this is 20 years ago, 21 years ago now. It was 2004 that the NDE happened. And
Yeah.
so I thought, okay, thank you. I don't want to tell that part because I don't want to think I'm crazy, but I know what happened. So then let's fast forward. We
Yeah.
did the
Yeah.
glimpses of eternity. Put my story in in the heaven encounters or whatever it was, that book. And then I've told the story because of that. I did this marketing campaign, and I told the story on YouTube. And one of the things they made it into kind of a movie, and it's got like over 1.5 million views. And I was reading one of the comments one day, and it said,
Yeah.
it was a hallucination caused by a high temperature. And I thought, man, no, it wasn't, because when Jesus showed up the next day and I had that conversation with him in my hospital room, my temperature was normal, or almost. It was 100. And I thought,
Yeah.
I know. I mean,
Yeah.
I know. I've read all the reasons why people said, it was caused by this or that. And right when I was reading that comment, I heard Jesus in an audible voice say, now's the time to tell your entire story. You are ready, and the world is ready. So go tell the whole story. So that's when I wrote the new book.
Wow.
Um, and the second part of it, uh, I was 24 hours later, I was battling pneumonia. I mean, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't breathe. I called the nurses. They came into my hospital room, hooked me up to oxygen. She put a stethoscope on my chest, and she listened. And one of the nurses said, I'll never forget her words. She says, "Oh, honey, you're developing pneumonia." And I thought, oh man, that's why Jesus took me to heaven, because I'm going to die. Because I
Oh
thought,
man.
I am so sick. I was so weak, I couldn't pick up my hands off my chest. And I thought, I'm so weak, I'm toast. I'm not going to make it. I waited too long. I actually waited 4 days to go to the hospital. Um, so they packed me in ice, and yeah,
Mm.
I know.
Yeah, that
My
appendix
appendix
nothing to
had
play
ruptured
with.
4 days before, but I didn't have the
Yeah.
classic symptom. I wasn't in pain. I just thought I had the flu. So they ended up packing me in ice. They gave me a
Okay.
spirometer to
Okay.
breathe into to clear my lungs, and 3 hours later, my lungs did clear. But when the other nurses left the room, one lady stayed sitting next to my bed, and I just felt this holy presence enter the room, and I thought, well, this is weird. I thought maybe the angels were there to take me to heaven, right? The atmosphere, everything changed in that room. And
Yeah.
I hear Jesus say, Michael, same voice that I heard 24 hours before. And I said, yes. And he says, Michael.
Wow.
And I was like, what's going on here? I looked at the nurse. The nurse didn't hear him. The nurse didn't hear my response. And I'm talking out loud. And she's just sitting there, just monitoring me. And Jesus says, I had to get you flat on your back, away from all the distractions, so that you could hear me.
Mm.
And that began a 3-hour conversation. And I
Wow.
mean, 2 hours of it was probably me saying, Jesus, is this really happening? Because it was so bizarre. And he would just chuckle and say, yes, it's real. And I talked to, it sounds weird. I mean, 20 years ago, it sounded, I guess, a little stranger, but now I don't know. I think that he used that 20 years to get people ready to hear this kind of stuff. He's using YouTube for his
Yeah.
glory.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Now, in this conversation with Jesus, did you get clarity as far as what you saw
you
in
know,
heaven, the beams,
one
the
of the things that
buildings,
I
and everything?
realized was we don't celebrate the cross in heaven. Um, but he didn't mention that, but that just, I
Yeah.
realized it after I was done talking to him. Um, he didn't have anything crazy to say. It wasn't like prophecy, the world's going to end in 20 years or something. But he did prepare me for some things that I was going to go through in my own
Yeah.
life. He actually told me that I would tell my story to millions, and I
Yeah.
told him he was crazy. I said, I'm not Billy Graham.
Mm.
Back then, I mean, YouTube was all music videos, right? I mean, there was
Wow.
no NDE channels, or people just didn't share
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things. And he said, our story, he
Yeah.
called it, is going to be heard by millions. And I was like, no, I'm not going to talk to millions of people. You got the wrong guy. And he just kind of, he said, no, your story is going to be heard by millions.
Wow.
And I thought, well, okay, but I don't like talking to crowds. I don't like talking to more than 3 people at one time. So during the next 20 years, he used
Mm.
me, and he put me
Yeah.
in situations where I was uncomfortable, but then I got more comfortable. I ended up talking to larger crowds, not about Jesus, but it's kids sports. I was a coach. I started a youth football league, and I had to talk to 400 or 500 people at one time. And I think I got pretty good at it, good enough for Jesus to
Mm.
say, yeah, let's tell the whole story. So use that 20 years to get me ready.
Wow. N- Now, you describe your faith before this experience as sort of
Yeah,
like a Sunday Christian. So can you like explain what that is and how your faith was
sure.
before this experience, cuz I think that part
Yeah,
is important to your
I was
story.
a Sunday Christian. I mean, I would go to church every couple of Sundays. I didn't belong to a church, but we had kind of a home church that my kids liked, and so we would go there. I thought church was important for kids, but honestly, I didn't get much out of it. I mean, I was kind of bored, and I didn't like singing. I mean, I didn't like the songs. Um, it was okay, but it just, I don't know. I just didn't get anything from it. I believe in God. I always have, because like I
Right.
said, as a young kid, I would pray to God and ask him to show me heaven and show me his glory. I thought that was pretty, yeah. But I mean, as far as a relationship with
Yeah.
Jesus, just wasn't there. And then, yeah, yeah.
The
And that's what it's all
relationship
about.
wasn't there.
People
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like even people today will say, "Oh,
Mhm.
organized religion, that's not for me." Um, and I get it. I mean, it wasn't for me back then either. But once you have a relationship with Christ. I mean, I hear him talk to me a lot. I mean, I've heard his audible voice probably 20 times in my life. And I've always come back with proof later that whatever he says, it was actually him saying it because of what happens later. I get the proof. But I hear him talking in my spirit all the time. And he's more like a friend now than uh, some big god in the sky that wants to strike you down when you do something bad. That's the way I think a lot of people look at God.
Now, if you didn't have your NDE, do you think you would have this relationship, or do you think you would have continued on with just
Hmm.
going to church on
You know,
Sundays and just sort of the
I
ritual of
think
things?
that it was all part of God's plan, so there was no secondary. What would happen if, because it was destined to happen.
Because I asked that because I know that there are people that probably is listening to this, or people that you have even probably talked to, and that's how they feel. Like
Yeah,
they are Sunday Christians. So how can they know who Jesus is?
yeah,
Because now you don't just believe in Jesus, you know
yeah,
Jesus. Like he's like a friend to you, right? How can people start to know
yeah,
Jesus like you do without dying?
yeah. That was a rough
Like
recovery. I wouldn't
how
wish
can
that
you
on
recommend?
anybody. um, Well, I describe it
Right,
as a
right.
relationship. So how do I build a relationship with somebody? If I meet somebody, how am I going to build that relationship? Well, I'm going to have to probably start reaching out and talking, and then that person's going to talk back to me. I always tell people, ask God to
Hmm.
reveal himself, like I did. Hey, show me heaven. It took him 40 years to answer that prayer, but
Mm.
he didn't forget it, you know? Um, and
Right,
I mean, just start
right.
talking to them and wait to hear that reply. And when it happens, and I should say this, the easiest way for God to talk to us, or Jesus to speak to you, is to open the Bible and read the Bible. I mean, everybody's got a phone. You can get a Bible app. You can read it on your phone. It's
Mm.
super easy. Um, but that's taking the first step in building a relationship, is communication, and prayer goes right along with that. And then I kind of bag on organized religion, but if you're around other people, um, that's gonna spark your interest, and maybe somebody's gonna say something to you that you didn't know, or you didn't think. I mean, you're gonna grow as a Christian, and that's what relationships all about. Um, I mean, I prayed before. I never really asked God to reveal himself,
Hmm.
but I ask him that all the time now. And every once in a while he will. He'll pop up and surprise me.
As far as like the timing, because I know for me personally, the timing would be so frustrating for me because I would be like, Jesus, I prayed to you when I was
Yeah.
like 5 years old and asked for all of this. And now I'm grown and you're here. Like, how long do you expect me to
Yeah.
wait? You know what I mean? Like, how long, should people be like expected to wait for God to reveal them,
Yeah,
to
sure.
reveal
I mean, you
himself?
you
Because it
could
could get
it'd be easy to
discouraging.
get discouraged after asking God for something for 40 years. Um, that was my prayer as a kid. I didn't keep
Yeah.
it up when I became a teenager. It wasn't my nightly prayer. Hey, show me heaven. Come on, where are you? Uh, but he used that 40 years to
Yeah,
just
yeah.
prepare my heart. I mean, it's not like it's not like I
Hmm.
was just ready to accept.
Wow.
Like if I had an NDE 20 years ago, I mean 20 years before I did, when I was 25, 30. I mean, I was still young and
Yeah.
immature, and you know, uh, I don't know how I would have acted about it. How it would have impacted my life.
Hmm.
So I think it's all a matter of God's timing. It's not really
Yeah.
our timing. Like looking back on it, it's easy for me to say, yeah, at 40 years,
Yeah.
I grew as a person, as a Christian, and I became more um, curious. Like I was into finding out about heaven. And then
Yeah.
after I
Mm.
had the NDE, I couldn't get enough. I read every book I could find on heaven. Just kind of compare notes, you know?
I think the curiosity I think that curiosity is key. Like when you said, like you
Yeah.
just really started getting more and more
Yeah.
curious as the years go by. I
Yeah.
think that part is really big. Like just being curious and asking questions and trying to figure it out. Now, how can people get to heaven? You know, we've been sort of beaten down with the you need to do this to get to heaven. If you're gay, you're not going. If you cheat, if you're not going. If you do this, you do that, you're not going. So, how
I
can
think the
people get
most
to heaven?
important thing is that, um, and it kind of hit me like this: no matter who you are, Jesus died for you. Jesus is giving you that grace, that free ticket to heaven. Jesus knows you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm no saint. I probably sin every day. I'm sure I sin every day. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. Jesus is waiting for you with open arms. All you have to do is say, "Lord, I'm going to put my trust in you. Jesus, you're going to be my savior." Uh, uh, you know, I confess my sins. I'm a sinner. I'd like to be forgiven, and just become my savior. You know, it's simple. Jesus doesn't care if you're gay. He doesn't care what's going on in your life. Sure, he wants you to lead a godly life, but he understands that we're sinners and we can't out sin his grace. We just can't. You know, every day I think I want to be better than
Mm,
I was yesterday, but
I love that.
I fail him every day. In fact, I have a hat. It says, "Walking by faith,
Mm,
tripping constantly." That's me, and that's everybody. You know, that's everybody. Yeah, you can't out sin
yeah,
God's grace.
yeah. Have you been because a lot of people with NDEs I talk to, they have like other spiritual gifts or things that they can do now spiritually after their NDE. Have you
You
had
know,
any of those
of
type of
course, the big one is
experiences?
being able to hear the voice of Jesus. I recognize it instantly. I mean, all the time. He's talking to me all the time. Um, and I have to kind of
Hmm.
fine tune sometimes to think, well,
Hmm.
okay, uh, that's really you speaking.
How do you know the difference between Jesus' voice and your
Uh,
voice?
it's a different voice. I mean, it's completely different. Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
literally a different
Yeah. It's not
voice.
like me talking in my
Interesting.
head. Yeah.
Interesting.
No, it's very different.
And my last thing is like that glory of the Lord piece. To me, that like, if you can you like describe a little bit more of what that is? Like, what is the
Well,
glory of the
that was
Lord?
what I was shown. I don't know if I got to see everything, if there's more, if it gets more brilliant or beautiful, I couldn't imagine. But you know, the just the colors of the
Yeah.
sky, and then when those things started popping, those light beams, it was like they had like a prism or a diamond on the tip
Yeah.
of the trees, and when that one light beam hit it, it just popped like all over, like the
Mm.
best fireworks show you've ever seen, but it's just bright white, just super white, and they just would just go boom and just keep going and going, and then there's more pow pow all over the place, and I'm just looking around like, wow, this is unbelievable. And I kind of thought, you know, like the shepherds in the field when
Wow.
they said the glory of the Lord shone all around them. I thought, I wonder if it was the same thing, if it looked just like this, you know, or
Mm.
if they saw like a kind of a dumbed down version of it, you know, because it
Hmm.
was earthly, you know, and it wasn't, maybe it wasn't as vivid. I don't know.
It's like something just so
It's just
beautiful
so
that
hard to
you just can't
describe.
even like
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
ultimate fireworks, right?
yeah. It was
Yeah, yeah.
incredible.
Well, let's talk about your book. How can people get it?
Um,
Like, what's
this is
like how
they can
how
find it
can
on
people get in touch
Amazon.
with you and all of
It
that?
just actually just came out last week, so it's not in
Okay,
bookstores yet. It will be, but you know, if you want to go to the bookstore
okay,
and ask for it,
okay.
I'm sure they'll be able to get it. But yeah, it's I've only got one copy. I haven't got my author copies yet. And usually they send me about 50 copies, so I haven't gotten them yet. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Well, that's good to know. I'll definitely have the link in the description for the book. And as far as your, I'm gonna have it also in the description. But where can people find you on social media if they want
Oh,
to get the
sure.
book signed? How can they get that done? What do
Well,
you have coming up
you
for
can
the
find me
people?
on social media. I'm all over. I'm still doing Facebook. I just got started on TikTok. You know, it's fun. I'm probably not the most hip guy you've ever met on social media, uh, but I do have a website. It's MikeMcKinsey.com, and they can connect there. It's got my email address, and I don't have any book signings yet. We haven't done anything like that yet. It's just too soon. But I'm going to plan a book launch here. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so we'll be doing a book launch here soon, hopefully within a couple of
Okay,
weeks or so. But we'll see how it goes. Publishing
for
world moves a
sure.
little slow, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I really, really appreciate your story. I know other people are going to appreciate your story. As usual, you guys make sure you can subscribe, share everything. Vision Rebirth on all platforms. My name is E, and you can find me on _real E on all platforms. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. And cut.